Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome to another video. Hope you guys are doing well today. And in this video, we're going to be doing a mass breakdown of Diablo 4. So enjoy. I understand you may not want to watch the whole video, so here's a quick review of Diablo 4. The classes are great, albeit slightly imbalanced currently. The game offers a fantastic storyline in the campaign, but you will likely only ever play this once. The gearing system looks very confusing, but it's actually simple once you get past the initial part. Endgame content can be broken down into a few things such as PvP, open world, nightmare dungeons, and normal dungeons. However, they aren't all balanced at the moment as viable farming methods. Renown and Exploration, I actually really enjoyed this part, although was heavily reliant on a third party website to know where to go. I imagine you could almost play this like a single player game and just wander around doing objectives and still get a lot of enjoyment. So the big question, is it worth the money? In my opinion, yes. Even if you only get to the campaign and up to maybe 70, 80 in terms of level, and then similar in the first season, I believe you'll get enough hours of the game at that point to make it feel worth value. However, it's also not going anywhere, which means improvements to the game, you may see yourself coming back season upon season and getting more and more enjoyment over the years. There are 5 classes within Diablo 4. Rogue, Barbarian, Sorcerer, Druid, Necromancer. Now, Rogue fits both the Ranger and Assassin archetype perfectly, doesn't seem to ever be particularly weak, and is one of the most well rounded specs currently in the game. Has probably some of the best build diversity using both melee and ranged, traps and imbuements to create many builds. Barbarian starts off really slow, but transitions into this huge rage fueled monster, dealing massive damage, being incredibly tanky, and one of the strongest, most fun late game classes currently in the game. It has multiple builds late game, including the infamous Hammer of the Ancients, Whirlwind Barb, and even a Bleed Barb. Sorcerer seems to have the opposite problem to the Barbarian, the ability to devastate rooms early on, but in the very late game seems to fall off really hard in terms of damage and survivability. Has 3 or 4 builds that are meta currently and still enjoyable to play, however. Druid suffers from a similar problem to Barbarian in that they are very slow early in the game and are very aspect and unique hungry. Once unlocking these things, though, druids become a class just in their own league. They are exceptionally strong and very tanky. Currently, there are 3 druid builds that I know of. One that plays werebear with earthen skills as well, one that plays storm werewolf, and a caster-esque storm build. Necromancer is probably the worst class of the current 5. It naturally feels like you should be playing around this huge minion army. However, the minions are incredibly weak in themselves, and having the ability to sacrifice them just turns Necro into this chaotic mage, which in itself is quite fun, but probably not what Blizzard were going for. Currently 1 to 2 builds in meta late game, both Bone Spear and Bone Spirit. Bone Spear is this really high consistent damage, whilst Bone Spirit is some of the biggest numbers you'll see in Diablo 4. Think Jade Harvester of Diablo 3. Now, we are expecting a major patch prior to Season 1, of which we are expecting Druid loot table to be fixed, so they should be able to come online a little bit earlier, Sork to maybe receive some minor tuning, and Necro to receive some huge buffs. Diablo 4 has received some good reviews from blog writers, articles, and journalists alike, and the one consistent is just how good the story is throughout. We meet some old faces and are introduced to some new characters that we learn to love or hate. The entire campaign should take around 30 to 35 hours to complete for the average player, which for most players is going to take multiple game sessions to get through, and I truly believe this will continue to drag you back into the game. Overall, I skipped a lot of the cutscenes the first time, but I have gone back and played it since, and thoroughly enjoyed the campaign all the way through. So, what comes after the campaign, I hear you say? Well, Adventure Mode. This will be active on the character you completed the campaign on, and a choice to activate on any future alts at level 1. Adventure Mode allows you to freely wander around the world with limited restriction. Each zone has a recommended level if you are below it, however, will begin to scale with you, so you can just explore where you want and not feel punished for being over leveled. You can explore dungeons, side quests, the world, do events, the choice really is yours. However, Adventure Mode can get really repetitive fast, farming the same dungeon over and over again for most efficient experience, grinding dungeons with similar end bosses, or rescuing yet another NPC lost in the woods. The truth is, from here on out, Diablo will give you the path to walk, but you need to make it fun. PvP is one of the most enjoyable features of any game for me personally. Maybe that makes me a masochist, who knows. However, in Diablo 4, I think they've actually been the first game to get ARPG PvP done remotely well. The zone is one of the higher density places in the world for monsters with regular elite packs to encourage people to come. You earn a red dust currency for cosmetics or item gambling, and the PvP combat is oddly intense, very fun, but still quite light-hearted at the end of it all. Any currency earned during your time in the PvP area is only safe once redeemed via the altars, which highlight when being used, start a 45-second period of being the most wanted person on the map. Almost. There is also a bounty style system in Diablo 4. If one player stays out and builds up enough kills on different people around the map, they can fall under this most wanted system. They will be visible on everyone's maps, be unable to extract their seeds for 5 minutes, and generate a lot more seeds on kills of both mobs and people, creating this high risk, high reward system. Very, very fun. Helltides are one of the most frustrating mechanics of adventure mode for me personally. Helltides spawn at a frequency of 2 hours 15 minutes around the map and are active for 1 hour, so this means they'll be down for 1 hour 15. Mobs in the zone will be slightly higher level than you for this time, irrespective of scaling, and you'll notice increased density and start gaining cinders. Now, these cinders can be used to unlock chests, ranging from 75 cinders to 175 for a mystery chest. The rewards from these chests tend to be some crafting materials, a couple of elixirs, and a few items, often legendaries. The mystery chests can award up to, I believe, 5 legendaries, can be quite rewarding. Why Helltides are one of the most frustrating features in Diablo 4 to me is that they are almost mandatory content. Rolling stats on items in the endgame requires Forgotten Souls, only obtainable via Helltides, and in relatively low amounts. A good Helltide may yield 25 Forgotten Souls, whereas a bad one, maybe 5 to 10. The zone also tends to experience some lag currently whilst the Helltide is active, but I think that's something that's going to be fixed prior to Season 1. Overall, I think Helltides could be fun. I just don't like the idea of being near forced to do something on a timetable if I want to continuously roll items. Dungeons have a first time completion bonus, which encourages you to do each one once. This will likely be a legendary aspect to be able to put onto gear, and collecting these I actually found very enjoyable. Each dungeon seems to have ever so slightly a unique layout, although there are very obvious similarities between them. Often the only change is the direction in which the exit is. Each dungeon has objectives to complete: free the prisoners, kill X special mobs, or kill all of the mobs, just to name a few. These change between dungeons but remain consistent in the same dungeon. For example, if I was to run one dungeon over and over again, I'd always get the same objectives. The same can be said for the end bosses. However, the pool of end bosses are much less. You are likely to see the same 4 or 5 end bosses appear in most dungeons you complete, and again remain the same if you run the same dungeon over and over again. Overall, dungeons as a completion exercise are fun, but the real fun are in the nightmare dungeons. Nightmare dungeons are one of the true endgame activities of Diablo 4. They ignore the level scaling mechanic and instead scale at level of key, plus 50, plus either 3 or 4 depending on world tier 3 or 4. This means a level 15 key actually offers mobs at level 68. A level 55 key offers mobs at level 109. The maximum nightmare dungeon is level 100, offering mobs at crazy 154 level. All of these dungeons come with one positive affix, things like lightning strikes, magic find, gold find, um, damage reduction based on how low your health is, that sort of thing, and multiple negative affixes, such as this giant thing following me around the world and trying to shoot me with laser, or a dome that you have to hide in to avoid being effectively one shot, as well as limited revives. On World Tier 3, which up to a certain level of tier, you'll get 12 revives. On World Tier 4 and above, all of those keys will be 4 revives. They suffer from the same repetitiveness as normal dungeon, in that it's, well, exactly the same. Same objectives, same end boss, same mob types, all that sort of stuff. The only variance is the affixes and the difficulty level of the mobs. Eventually, that quill boy you've been one shot in all the way through your leveling and dungeoning experience is going to one shot back. But ARPGs are used to this, right? G riffs in Diablo 3, maps in Path of Exile. We know what we're getting into with this. Overall, these are very fun, and I would actually love to see a timer added to these at some point in the future. Events are something you will see throughout your time in the Diablo 4 world, even during the campaign. However, these are entirely optional. You can choose to interact or ride and run past. I tend to do these very impulsively. If I'm running past and haven't killed something in a while, I might do an event. If it's an event I see and I particularly like, I may stop and do it. Other times I'll ride straight by or just not bother at all. They don't do much for encouraging players to actively want to seek and find them outside of Helltides. Now, they could be more rewarding or more enticing, and I'd also like to see potentially group or elite events come in. Now, some people are going to say, yeah, but Legion events. Now, Legion events are something akin to group or elite events. However, they are less elite in difficulty, but more events that require more than one person just to be able to do it in time. I'd like to see something with a little bit more difficulty that encourages people to come in and complete it. Legion events, they're fun and there's lots of mobs, lots of density. You gain lots of experience through the campfire mechanic. I think it's definitely something that can be improved upon, but I don't think it's quite what I'm looking for with that yet. I'm going to include world bosses in this segment as well, as they're effectively large timed events. Every 6 hours or so, a world boss will spawn, creating a raid style fight that looks and feels epic. Every time I do a world boss, I see the potential for 4 to 8 man raid content with huge raid bosses, and it excites me all so much. This is a mechanic that I really, really hope they develop, and if they do, it could be wildly successful. So we've covered most, if not all, of the adventure mode features, but the last one remaining is Renown. Now, again, you can discover Renown while you're doing the campaign, and you will do actually quite a lot of it while doing the campaign in your first character. However, you'll have to finish it in adventure mode, I imagine. Farming Renown gives you gold, experience, and other account based rewards such as skill points, potion capacity, obels, and paragon points. And actually, as a collective, they can actually be quite a distinct power increase for exploring the world, which I think is really, really cool. Renown has multiple different ways of being earned, similar to a WoW style reputation. Completing any of the objectives gives you some reward to the total goal. Side quests, small 5 to 10 minute quests that can be anything from emoting at a pond to clearing part of a dungeon. Exploration, yeah, literally just discovering areas of the zone increases your renown in that area. Waypoints in each of the different cities and minor cities and quest hubs. Dungeons, the first time completion not only gives you an aspect, but also gives you renown. Strongholds. Now, I haven't talked much about strongholds, but they are this open world style dungeon with objectives and bosses. They're super cool one time content that often turns into like a quest hub or a minor city, which is really, really cool. Altars of Lilith, perhaps one of the grindiest aspects of Renowned in general, are the altars. Each altar rewards a small amount of renown and a smaller countdown bonus, such as like +2 to a stat, or maximum opal increase, or rarely a paragon point. Now, this grind took me about a day to do across all the zones. That was a long day. It was a huge power spike and a very noticeable reward for doing something that was actually really fun. The main argument against Renown is the idea of having to do it fresh every season. Blizzard recently did a 180 on their idea regarding this and have since said that Altars of Lilith and areas discovered will be unlocked if you've completed them before. And you will also potentially instantly gain the renown. So that's actually a huge change and will make, like, you'll do the rest of it just running around, which, not a problem, right? So, pretty fun. I specifically left gearing as the last segment because it's arguably the most complicated one. Gearing in Diablo 4 follows two structures. Firstly, white, blue, yellow, legendary, unique. That is the drop of items. So any item will follow one of these levels of rarity. The second one then is normal, sacred, and ancestral. Now, these will be kind of the role of which the item has dropped, or the item power of which the item has dropped. For the majority of the first half of the game, you will only see normal items. As you go into World Tier 3, you will see sacred items, and as you go into World Tier 4, you'll begin seeing ancestral items. Now, both of these systems interact with each other, so you can have both sacred and ancestral uniques and legendary. So it really encourages you to get to a point of ancestrals being your main source of drops as a point of urgency in the game. The stats that we find on items can also be quite complex. As an example, damage reduction comes in around 26 different roles, which is insane. From base damage reduction while an enemy is close, damage reduction versus elites, damage reduction whilst healthy, etc. When you consider all of these stats have many different variances, it can become quite complex to know what you want to get and aim for. Then introduced the damage bucket theory that explains how multiplicative stats work in Diablo 4, and it all gets a little bit much. Now, I've spent the first 60 levels of my Diablo 4 experience gearing solely off the item power number. And it felt great. I mean, finding a bigger item power number just felt naturally like you'd found an upgrade. And it worked for the easiest side of the content. But once you started progressing into harder content, I really felt that my power level just wasn't there. And I spent a few hours researching my stats and what I was looking for my specific class and build, and started to seek certain items such as critical hit chance, critical hit damage, and vulnerability damage as offensive stats, damage reduction while poison, damage reduction while trap, damage reduction while close. All of these things that played around my kind of trap rogue game style. And my power level increased massively. Even finding items that were quote unquote a downgrade in item power increased massively in terms of actual power. So to summarize, gearing can feel like an incredibly complicated feature of Diablo 4, and it is something that will take you some time to understand and get behind. But we'll eventually begin to understand it, and then the variety can actually be quite fun and refreshing to play around. So that's my Diablo 4 review. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys learned and it helped you. And yeah, any comments, please leave them in the comments below. I will get back to you. And yeah, thanks for watching, guys. Goodbye.